Quill is
Hi.
up.
Which screen am I sharing right now?
I see a very narrow browser window and we see the presentation.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is, Susan, but also known as Quilly of Quill Studios. And I'm going to be talking about generating dialogue with Ren'Py. So there's been a lot of Ren'Py talks today, which I'm very happy about. So a little bit about me, what I do at Quill Studios. I guess I mostly do most of the things apart from the art and UI, which actually Dia Sans does. So thank you so much. So I do I program in Ren'Py, I do the writing. The reason I mentioned this is because as a writer, I'm fairly lazy. And as a developer, I'm even lazier. So kind of going hand in hand gave me the idea for this talk. So I guess first of all, I just want to address the title, generating dialogue. So I'm going to be introducing two types of definitions for what generating is, because I think when I posed this question on Twitter, I guess a lot of people interpret it in different ways, right? Some being more like, oh, do you mean like AI generating dialogue, or do you mean something else, right? So I think, well, first of all, I want to start with, as a writer, sometimes I want to create more variations of dialogue, and it's very hard for me to be pasting those things in my code again and again. So it's pretty tiring. And as a lazy person, I kind of didn't want that. So the first definition I'm going to be using for dialogue generating is that I want to create kind of combinations of dynamic dialogue that can just have thousands or hundreds of combinations that don't require me manually typing it out. So it'll be more clear what I mean by this. And another concern that was brought up on Twitter was that if you're generating dialogue, does that, because you don't want to affect some sort of canon or design of your story, right? You don't want someone to say something that's completely out of character as a story designer, right? You don't want that. So in this first type of definition, you will be in control of what is acceptable to say, so that the character will not be, or the story will not be randomly generating sentences that are out of character. So yeah, just to touch on that, like, I guess in other talks we've mentioned some sort of more random behavior and random scripts. At first, when I started doing VN Dev, I definitely kind of wanted to have some random choices now and then. But the general, I guess, consensus for a more serious game that's non-experimental is that you want the player to have more consistent walkthroughs each time. So I'm not going to mention randomly generating choices, but rather just bits and pieces of dialogue. So I guess in some games that are more experimental, like this game on screen, like Once on a Windswept Night, has some kind of RNG generated events. So that also is a type of thing, but I'm not going to be including that in the scope. But you could check that out. And also Doki Doki Literature Club has some randomly generated events as well. So the second type of definition I want to mention is you can grab stuff on the internet with URL lib that's available in Ren'Py. And this is going to be like at the very end, some random machine learning approaches that people might associate with generating dialogue generation. But this is very hard. It's basically, there's no point in doing it without writing a lot of text yourself. If you want a coherent story, like that is just not something you would be doing at the moment. So just to give a quick overview for people, I guess most people know Ren'Py by now, and the creator, Ren'Py Tom, is in the audience today. But yeah, it's open source, and it enables pretty high production quality visual novels to be built. So I'm just going to go into some examples of the first type of dialogue generation, which is creating bits of random pieces that fit within your story canon. So just an overview, this game is made in Ren'Py. And I guess it looks like it's cute dogs, I know, but I guess like someone has written it. This is not my words, I guess. It's like a sort of unsettling love child of MMO like Call of Duty and a much more advanced Oculus Rift. So take what you, I don't know, you can interpret that how you like. So yeah, a lot of dialogue is in visual novels, right? And other games as well. Like we all remember this guy from Skyrim, the arrow to the knee guy in Skyrim. And the thing is, writing repeating dialogue when people, for example, in a central hub that people keep coming back to, is pretty difficult. It's, you kind of have a list of sentences and then they get exhausted, right? So it, you kind of, there are ways to keep this more like with more variety, I would say, right? So perhaps instead of writing hard coding all of the sentences, right? Like this is hello, how are you? So you can see that there are different parts, like maybe the beginning has, you can select a couple of variations of the beginning and a sort of middle and then the end. So you could have more flavor text by combining these and just selecting one of the kind of part one of the sentence, part two of the sentence, and part three of the sentence, and so on and so forth. So this is just a very, very simple example, but you can use this to generate like paragraphs and paragraphs of, I guess, dynamic text that is a bit different each time, but then you can also use if-when logic so that, like maybe this is a sentence that's said by one character and they won't say something unless you have completed a side quest. So you can still code that logic in. So they won't be saying spoilers until you have completed that side quest. So that is still possible to do. And I guess just as a little bit of a code, I'm not going to go into the code in this talk because I think it's not really within the scope. But the example in my game is that I had a timer to see how long players took to make decisions, and then it would kind of generate a new sentence each time. So here I have the tool keeps coming up, but basically a bunch of first part of the sentence and then second part of the sentence and third part of the sentence. So it wouldn't say each time like interesting, interesting, interesting. It'd be like, sometimes it'd be like interesting, sometimes like whoa, sometimes wonderful, so that I didn't have to hard code everything. So I don't know if this is showing properly, but so after a choice is made, here you click and then it says like interesting, it took blah, blah, blah seconds, and then something, something, something. So that is a very, very simple example. Like there are more complicated examples, but this is just one of them. So each time it would be different. I don't know if you can see this properly, but so this time I clicked on the choice button and it said like, blah, 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 instead of interesting. And instead, and if, because I noticed when using the Ren'Py rollback, there would be the situation of it would just say the same time again, but then, I made it so that if you are in the rollback mode, then it would say something else. So that is kind of a rules-based situation, right? So if you are rolling back, you don't want the time to be repeated again, in my opinion. So depending on you can use this to generate dialogue that is repeating a lot of times. So I don't know how to close this. Okay, it is closed. Yeah, so each time it will say something different. And because this is a very repetitive sentence, so this appears pretty frequently when you make a choice, not all the time. But it's kind of like the Skyrim NPC, right? You keep reading a variation of this, and if you keep reading the exact same variation, it gets pretty tiring. So the thing is, you do still need to write those things up front. You need to write the acceptable part one, part two of the sentences, and then you need to define the rules to generate. And on Twitter, quite a few other devs have mentioned using this type of method as well. Like Steam Girl has mentioned that she uses it, and some other devs as well. But I guess the the methods may vary. Yeah, so now I'm going into the more experimental dialogue generation. This is more of the weird kind of random stuff I tried in Ren'Py. So I'm sure there are people who have other expertise in Ren'Py, and the way I did it is not necessarily the only way to do it. So yeah, I was hearing a lot about Netflix and The Witcher, and I haven't seen it yet. But basically, so I went on the Wikipedia page to find the wiki of Henry. Yeah, so if you could use URL lib, which is actually just supported in Ren'Py, to grab content from the internet if you want to. But I want to give a word of warning that this is kind of at the mercy of whoever owns the site. So if Wikipedia changed any type of formatting and whatnot, then your code could just break. So what this does is that you can use URL lib, which is, it accesses, so I guess to put it in plain terms of to programmers and non-programmers alike, like, you know, when you go on a website, you like right click and there's like inspect source or something, and you get a bunch of HTML, and sometimes you get the plain text. This will grab that thing. So you can use URL lib to basically grab that. And then what it looks like in the console will be, so for example, here, I just grabbed the entire Wikipedia page of Henry Cavill. So here in the Ren'Py console, so this is like a developer mode, like in a shipped game, you shouldn't be able to see this, but you can see stuff that is grabbed from Python. So you can see that there's a bunch of stuff I don't need. Like this is like some sort of like JSON. And sometimes you can see some sort of like HTML stuff depending on what you do. And this is like some sort of new tab or new line character, which I had to clean up. So basically what I'm saying, if you're just using the library, you actually need to do a fair bit of work on your end, depending on the website. But I'm saying that you can grab a lot of dialogue or, you know, text. Like if you want someone to be quoting a random phrase from like Naruto or something, you could go to like some sort of quote wiki and then grab it sometimes instead of copy pasting everything. But, you know, sometimes this is over the scope, but, you know, this is experimental. So I felt this is just to give some inspiration in case. It might not make it into some shipped games because of the possibility of it breaking. So one other thing I wanted to mention, this is the method that I used, whether if it's generating, grabbing dialogue from a website or just using randomly generated sentences that I myself wrote, right? You can just use Python. If you're using Python within Ren'Py, then you can have a variable, define the variable here, which is like a string. So it's like, hi, I'm saying a Python variable. So this stuff is hard coded, right? This is not changing, but then you can insert the variable within here, and then Ren'Py will be able to parse and show that. So basically, if I had the Henry Cavill, am I saying that right? Henry Cavill, okay. But basically, if you grabbed that and then cleaned it a bit with Python and just called that variable the clean sentence, then it will show here. So I'm using the sample game from Ren'Py. So just credits to that. So you can grab stuff from the internet and display it with enough cleaning. So yeah, you can see in the Ren'Py console that this is what it's showing. So yeah, there's other content. So I tried so this is a Sherlock Holmes website, and it has all of the text from the Sherlock Holmes games. Not games, novels. Yeah, been listening too much to game dev stuff today. But basically, this is a random site that I grabbed. So it was formatted in some sort of other encoding. So, you know, these other new tab or new line characters show up like weirdly. So either you have to find a better plain text website or, you know, clean this up with your code. So again, like this is more experimental. However, there's another way. So so just as an aside, some of these things don't work straight out of the box with Ren'Py. Sometimes you need to grab additional code from the Python source code, so you'd have to go here. But for the scope of this, feel free to, I guess, talk to me on Twitter or Discord about this. So sometimes basically you need to go to the Python language repo and then grab some scripts. So HTML parser, HTML entity definitions and stuff was some tools I used to clean up the HTML you grab. So there's another use case of this in actually a shipped game. So I really wanted to mention that. And the previous talk had just mentioned Lady Killer in a Bind, but at the end of the game, you have a stats page, right? So it says like how many people or how many global players, global I'm assuming, have gotten this, and then it will display it back to you. So this thing is kind of a dynamic content, right? And it could be used for dynamic dialogue as well, but just in general, this type of stat screen of your VN at the end is dynamic. Oh, I think I'm really short on time, but yeah, so basically it's a real website, okay? Like Christine Love, the creator of Lady Killer in a Bind, has an actual website here, and she has tweeted about it, this site. So when you go on this site, it actually just displays the page that will show to you at the very end of the visual novel after you play it. And what it's doing, it's using URL lib2 and Ren'Py to grab the content from the real website that she's hosting and then displaying it back. And so there's a bit of cleaning, I think, to get from the website HTML content to display on Ren'Py, but like that is done with code. So now even more weirder. So at first when I mentioned this talk, yeah, y'all were like, oh, you mean like machine learning generation. So there's like GPT-2. Another method I tried is I tried to use URL to grab this. So you paste in some text, right? And I'll use GPT-2, which is a machine learning model to generate stuff. So you can see that it generates some like kind of gibberish, like readable, grammatically perhaps correct, but like kind of unrelated, but semi-related things. But this website has protected itself. It's using reCAPTCHA plus. So basically it's like impossible to get with URL lib. But some other sites, I'm not going to name them, have more kind of plain text. So for the web devs there, like this can be grabbed, I guess, in plain text on some other experimental websites, but not this one. This one has done a good job of protecting its stuff. Yeah. And other methods I've kind of tried, because I guess in my daytime, I work a lot with Python and the associated machine learning and data libraries. And a lot of them required compiled C code, which I guess in Ren'Py is kind of like an optional, like it doesn't come out of the box. I could really try to get it to work, but I guess for the stability and reliability, I didn't really, I guess, go to that level to try to do that. Because I guess I wouldn't be shipping a game with it. But then, yeah, the second method I mentioned is if you really wanted to, you could make a site with your own machine learning model and then grab it with URL lib, I guess, another way. And there are some models out there nowadays that, like, for example, BERT, this is an achievement in my game because I just wanted to reference stuff that I like. Yeah, but they can emulate more your writing style. So, for example, here, right, they could, if you paste in a lot of your text, then it could kind of emulate your writing style, but like what comes out might not really make sense despite being grammatically correct. But yeah, that is just to sum up some methods. So the first one, more practical, is just using methods to generating combinations, variations, dynamic flavor text, right? And the second part is more experimental, or using the website content to grab. So if you do own your own website, then it's great. You like like the Lady Killer in the Bind, right? Like she owns the website, so it won't completely break. But if you're doing Wikipedia and they do some sort of like overhaul of the site, then your game will break. Yeah, so there's that. So I don't know why that slide there, but yeah, now I think I've timed out. Let's go and generate some dialogue, but you have to write first. Sorry, writers, your jobs are not going away. But yeah, any questions and concerns? feel free to contact me.
All right, we have time for about a couple of questions. Let's see here. Okay, so easy. How about user-created comments? Let someone type in a sentence and then someone else gets that dialogue. Oh God.
I see. So you mean like a kind of like a online. I think there are some games that do use like for example, like maybe the prompt is supposed to be like say something nice, and then another player will get that like A says something nice and B will randomly get it. But then like what's to prevent? So I guess if I won't go into the moderating question, like I think the way I would do this, if it were just in Ren'Py, and Ren'Py Tom can correct me, is like I would probably just like send that to my own like web server or like website, like the Lady Killer in the Blind one, and then like pass it with another one. But then you'd really have to set up. That would be a bit complicated, but I think it's technically doable. Like maybe not in real time necessarily if you wanted like pure real time, but like it could probably be done.
Yeah, probably. There's enough tech in Python for you to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Though I saw you put up EarlLib and EarlLib2, and I'm like, no. Those libraries are we have requests for a reason. It's like, okay. We have time for about one more question if anyone's got. Oh, okay. Have you looked into parsing or natural language processing?
I guess so. Do you mean parsing the natural language processing? Because I guess like the machine learning methods are what I would think you mean by natural language processing.
Well, that's my question. So, like some of the really old school AI attempts where they were trying to figure out how to pass the Turing test, and they're like, basically like if the computer notices that you mentioned something like the word family in what you were saying, it would react to that or something like that.
I guess there would be some hard-coded kind of logic in that then, you mean? Like, let's say like family is a keyword that has to be defined or kind of noticed. Like you could say like if family is mentioned quite a lot of times, then that could be one of the core categories, but then you'd have to like code that in, like if family is mentioned again, then something. So I guess that kind of falls into the first, kind of like a mixture of like the first and second methods that I mentioned.
To make it like, I guess, really high pass, which I guess probably totally overkill, but you'd basically have to make it like a machine learning algorithm that would use user input as its training data or something.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just to come back to that, because a lot of the methods I would use to create a machine learning model would still require, I guess if we were talking about Ren'Py within the scope of Ren'Py, then there would be some more hoops you'd have to try to get it to work. For example, maybe you could try to get the C code inside your own version of Ren'Py. I mean, I'm just like throwing this out. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, integrating some of those modules into Ren'Py is kind of a pain, but well, whatever.
Okay, we'll move this into the chat so that Steam Girl will have time to do hers.